Yeah, ready.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone, and hello, Sophie, our wonderful guest of today. Welcome to She Owns It, the final chapter. So, just before we head into it, I will say hello to you, Sophie. Thanks for joining us.
No worries. It's interesting seeing. I didn't know I'd see everyone's faces. I didn't know if it was like I wouldn't see anyone. So this is
Oh,
great.
okay. How do you feel about that? Do you like seeing the faces, or would you prefer not to see the faces?
We can
Ah,
turn it off.
just no. It's good. It's good. If you think something's awful, let me know. I'll be able to see anyway.
Yeah, have the facial expressions on. So yeah, what I wanted to do before launching into today's session is just to do a really brief recap of the other sessions that we've had, and then I would definitely encourage people, if you weren't on those other sessions or if you have only just joined on this one, then recap on the others because they've been amazing and really useful to people, I hope, and the feedback has been great. So the first session we did about self-worth and how to stop doubting yourself, and really got into the difference between self-worth and self-esteem, and just focusing in on how to really make the best of that for yourself. The second one was about work-life balance, managing family, kids if you have kids, and still having a thriving career. The third one was about confidence in negotiation and assertive communication. So yeah, just really focusing on the fact that obviously this whole series is aimed at women but hasn't only been attended by women, but to not be that sort of quiet voice in the room as you are female. The next one was the power of networking and personal branding. So that was the last one, which honestly I feel like was like last week, so I can't believe it was a month ago. And then obviously today, so today we're talking about benefits, asking for more, and climbing the slippery career ladder. So yeah, also just want to reiterate how this kind of came about was because Poppy and I were actually discussing on the back of annual reviews last year that so many of the women had amazing reviews and everything's perfect, 10 out of 10, amazing, and then would never ask for anything like, oh, by the way, can I have a pay rise? And then conversely, some of the men who might have also been amazing, but they may have had actually quite negative reviews, and then still at the end been like, okay, and I want a 50% pay rise and a 20% bonus. So it was just really interesting, and we were saying like we want the women to really be asking for that as well, like be bold and ask, even if the answer's no, so what, like crack on, and then maybe next time it will be different. So yeah, that's how this came about, and it's not just about pay, it's about being seen, having a voice, being respected, like backing yourself, being backed by others. And obviously, Sophie, now I want to get into you, that you've got an amazing background which we'll go into in more detail, but also you're a real advocate for women in male dominated industries as well. So yeah, very, very keen to hear from you, and would just kick things off really by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about how you got to where you are today.
Certainly, yes. So I'm Sophie Brown. I'm currently Director of Growth and Partnerships at Talentia Group, which is education, recruitment. I've been here about 5 months, absolutely loving it. But my background is over 10, 12 years in more tech related roles, always been male dominated, more commercial roles, more salesy type roles. I dropped out of university actually after 3 months. Owed about 7 grand and paid that off for a few years, but dropped out of UWE in Bristol and pursued my career. I was always an entrepreneur. My dad's an antiques dealer, proper wheeler dealer. And I learned that from him. And university is amazing for some people. But personally, I went there, I wasn't really enjoying it. I was far away from home, but close enough to go home at the weekends if I wanted to. And it just wasn't for me. So it was a great financial and career decision in the end. But I've grown as a person and through my career. I started in literally like lead generation roles, moved into account management and senior account management, started managing teams in my early 20s. I think I was about 23, had a team of 6. And then moved up into more senior positions. And last year, I was actually commercial director of a tech startup, which was really interesting, literally from the idea to naming it to, the marketing strategy, commercial strategy and everything. So it's been a real journey. Oh, and somewhere in there, I went on a television show as well. There's a little 2 year sort of hiatus there where I did some amazing presenting and hosting. And, as you said, Robin, I get to speak about the things that I care about, things like women in tech and women in sales. And this salary negotiation topic is just so important, and hopefully I can do it a bit of justice.
Wow, amazing. Love that. Really, really fantastic career journey that you've had, and obviously now using your platform. So what was the program, just out of interest?
Yeah, it was Married at First Sight on Channel 4.
Was it fun?
Fun. No, it was an experience. It was a once in a lifetime experience, and I'm very grateful for it. It's quite nice. I was the youngest on my series. I was 25 in the process, 26 when I got married, and I'm almost 30 now. So, well, not almost, but we're getting there. Yeah, so it's long enough ago now that I can talk about it quite candidly, which is nice. But it's still a part of my life and my experience, and it has opened up some incredible opportunities for like the presenting and things like that. So, yeah.
Amazing. Cool. Well, on all the other stuff, which is obviously a bit more exciting for the purpose of this call.
Yes.
So how do you almost become an advocate for women in male dominated industries versus some people who are women in male dominated industries that might sort of just shrink to the position that they are maybe squished into?
It's really difficult. I think that not everybody kind of wishes to take that upon themselves, and it's not something you necessarily have to do. Just because you're in that environment, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be that person that speaks up. Obviously, that would be amazing, but I think that the issue is that we see is not having enough of the female role models and the voices, and that's what we need more of. So that's kind of why I took it upon myself, and my experience wasn't the best. I mean, I started in a sales role when I was just turned 19, just dropped out of uni, and it was literally male dominated. I'm talking men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and I had to adjust to them. They did not adjust to me. There was no adjustment to having a female, literally nothing. The language they used, the way they acted, their attitude, it was me having to adapt to them. So I think I feel like it's kind of once you come out of an experience and you kind of experience something new that you realize maybe what the negative connotations and things that happened were. So on reflection, I think I've then taken that forward and been like, right, I'd like to do something about this. And I speak to a lot of young people as well, and I don't think people quite realize what the workplace is or what that looks like. And it's definitely changed. I mean, this was 12 years ago that I started out in my career, and we've definitely improved and advanced, but there's still similarities, especially in, things like commercial roles, sales teams and that kind of thing. But I guess I just took it upon myself. I kind of saw that more voices were needed, but it isn't an easy thing to do. It's quite difficult. Sometimes you speak up about things and you get loads of backlash. You get put things out on LinkedIn, and we've probably all done it, and then we get people comment, and it happens, and you kind of have to just push through that. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, but I think I sort of identified that if no one speaks up, we're not really going to have any voices, and we need that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll come on to social media after as well, because I wanted to discuss that with you. But yeah, in terms of the pay stitch, so have you ever been in a situation yourself where you feel like you realise you're underpaid, and what did you do about it?
Every sales role. No, I'm joking. Do you know, I would say, and this is where I kind of back myself on it. From the age of when I got my first role, I didn't negotiate. So that was my first ever role. I started on 15 grand and I had commission. I was just pleased to get a job. I come out of university, dropped out, and everyone was, I think, looking at me like, what the heck are you doing now? So I managed to get this role. It was a proper sales job. So that one kind of didn't land at my feet. I went and got it, but I didn't negotiate, and it's the only one that I haven't. But my first role when I was in Manchester, I moved up I got headhunted for a role when I was 20, I think it was. And I essentially said I didn't take the first offer they gave me. I remember sitting in my car in a car park after work, because I was trying to be sneaky. I didn't want my current work to know that I was obviously interviewing for other roles. And I said, look, and I probably backed myself at that age even. I think back I had a lot of confidence and sort of tenacity. But I was like, look, I'm moving my life up there. I think I'd be an asset to the team. I've got 2 years experience now in account management. And I managed to negotiate basically a commission plan for the first 3 months. So they gave me additional money that I would have lost out on, and a pay rise increase, which was incredible. So I have managed to negotiate, I think, every salary that I've had, or I've at least had that discussion, which has obviously been beneficial. I wanted to remind myself of a bit of a stat because it's an interesting one. But especially when you're starting out in your career, if you've got someone that's on 25K, they enter their career, or even, wherever you're at, and someone that's on the same role or similar in another company at 30, over 10 years, just from like the yearly sort of average increase that you could get, that's worth 60 grand. That's a house deposit. And that's without any additional negotiating. It makes such a difference. And when you place yourself in the market, if you're being undervalued or underpaid in your current position, the first thing they ask is, what's your salary or how much are you getting paid? It doesn't matter what you necessarily think you're worth.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you're on 30 and you think you should be on 38, or that's the industry average, or you've been doing things that are above your pay grade, if you go somewhere else, they're going to base it on the 30, not the 38. And that's where we've got to start thinking proactively than reactively to what we're getting paid.
It's so true. And I think it's interesting as well because the negotiation point, I feel like some people, like you say, if you're just grateful to get a job, they don't even think maybe I should negotiate this. And they don't even think necessarily that that's even a thing. But I'll tell you guys on the call that I have in the past not given someone a job. I've actually withdrawn an offer because they didn't negotiate and they were going for a sales role. And I was thinking, like, if you're not even actually going to back yourself and negotiate this salary at all, then I actually don't think that you're a good salesperson. So it's actually you are expected to negotiate usually, even though at first you think, oh, how dare I have the audacity to negotiate?
It's a really scary thing, right? And especially if you land your dream job, because who's going to be like, I'm going to jeopardize this? But honestly, it's like you just mentioned there. I know not every role is a commercial sales role, but it still stands the same. The expectation is that you will negotiate. Like it's like that attitude of like I had when I was 20 years old. I'm an asset to that business. I will go and do a good job. And you won't ruin your chances. You'll only ruin chances if you're really, bolshy with it, or you don't take no for an answer, or you have a legitimate reason. Things like relocation, things like, there's loads of different things. I always said, like, if I talk about it, it's like your pay is literally your livelihood. Like, what lifestyle do you want for yourself? Like, let's say you take a role and you think it's the perfect role, but it's slightly less money than I would have liked. If you don't get a pay rise for the next couple of years or however long it is, that might really financially impact you, especially the decisions you want to make. If you're buying a house or something like that, could start a family, it could be anything. It's literally like the biggest thing. Like especially if you have a role where you can't earn commission or bonus and it's, a flat rate, even more so. There was a girl that I worked with at my previous company, and I did kind of a little salary negotiation talk, and she came to me and she said, confidentially, I've got another role, but I'd like to ask for a bit more money. Now, the whole women in tech advocacy kind of came from that. I'm quite a commercial, confident person, but a lot of the women that work in like STEM roles and tech and that kind of thing don't have that level of confidence to go out and ask for it. And it's not fair, the fact that I can kind of go and ask for it and then someone else just won't. And then unfortunately they'll kind of be like a step behind. So that's why I try and advocate for it. But we put together an email. She was really worried. She said, I don't want to put them off. And I was like, we're not going to put them off. Let's do it really carefully and concisely and give them reasons. You've got to give reasons. Like we talk about this and we say, asking for more. We can absolutely do that, but we do have to back it with, consistency and like the good work to, behind that to back it. But yeah, we put together this email and got her a higher offer, and she was absolutely over the moon. And had she not done that, she would have just been happy to please to get the role. And we must be more assertive than that. Like we must be more, we must go for it, because it works. You're not going to ruin anything unless you say something awful and then like we don't really want to hire them anymore. But asking for more in most situations, if not all, is advantageous, and they're gonna appreciate that.
Yeah. And something that it just made me think when you were speaking is that to give you more confidence with the negotiation, what you might do is sit down and think, right, okay, I've applied for a job and it's, let's use your figure of 38k or 40k to round up so that my maths doesn't confuse my brain. If they were going to recruit me, if they were going to recruit this role through a recruiter, let's say you didn't come through a recruiter, they're going to have to spend, let's say, 15 to 20% of that salary on finding a whole other person. They're also obviously in need of this role. So they're going to have to start the whole process again if they lose me from this process. So actually, maybe you're asking for an extra 4k. Well, already you're kind of convincing yourself that this is okay to ask, so it gives you a bit more confidence to then go and ask. You don't need to say that to them, that, you know, I'm saving you another recruitment fee and the time and blah blah blah. But it just, like you said, it is a scary thing to go in, because you think, am I actually, like, which side of the fence am I on here? Am I going to ruin it for myself, or am I going to back myself and get more money? So yeah, definitely like doing those calculations to make yourself feel better. And then the other thing that I think is, obviously, when you're saying, you know, I am an asset to your business, well, why are you an asset to their business? Because you're going to make them more money than what they've currently got. So either they've got a big gap and they need you, or you're going to make it better because what they've currently got isn't quite working. So again, I think if you can quantify that, which I've always been in operational roles, so I find it's more difficult to quantify when you're in operational roles, but you can still do it. And then, yeah, if you can quantify the value that you're adding to them, you can probably add tens of thousands of pounds, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds, with what value you're going to bring. Therefore, the 5-10 grand that you're extra asking for is a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly that. And we might get onto this, but the importance of making a log of, especially if you're operational or support or roles like that. Obviously with sales, you literally kind of have your sales numbers, but it's quantifying it, it's the ROI, and that's what a lot of managers will come back with, and they'll say, well, you're brilliant and we think you're fantastic, but we can't quantify that. And if you can do that, then that will set you apart. And they can't really say no if you've got the facts to back it up. But make a note of everything you've worked on that was, you know, any feedback you got that was really positive, things that are over and above the norm, because this also is just helpful anyway. If you've got this when you apply for new jobs, things like alongside your CV is fine, you know, but hundreds of thousands of other people have their CV that can look, you know, a bit similar. But if you've got kind of an additional page that you've got work that you've done over and beyond, then use that, because you do have to, you know, you have to come with something than just say, I deserve more money.
Yeah. And that's also for, obviously, you know, getting a promotion or a pay rise within the same job as well. It's not just necessarily about going for a new job, but if you can, and even like when it comes to annual reviews, like you forget about things that happened 11 and a half months ago when you got your annual review. So it's so much easier, like you say, if you kept a note on your phone or a piece of paper in your notebook, and you've just noted the things that, the value that you've added to the business, both tangibly and maybe intangibly as well along the way, then yeah, definitely think that's such a good idea. And on the note actually of non-tangible or operational, or let's say, you know, the like branding, for example, these kinds of roles, like what would your advice be to those kinds of roles where they don't have an easy sort of, this is black and white, this is the money that I've made for the business? How should they do that?
It's a good question. I think that the having a log of things where you've gone over and beyond the certain projects that you've worked on. I think that obviously with AI and everything like that, I mean, ChatGPT is absolutely phenomenal. I think that's how you can place yourself, and how competitive your salary is. You need to understand where you sit in the market, and if your company is falling short and they're not paying you what the average is, or even the top of that band, you can easily get that information, and you can kind of use that in a professional way. You know, I wouldn't print it out and go, you know, I'm not being paid enough, but it's a really brilliant tool to find out information. And because it's not so tangible, because it's you know, it projects that you've worked on and that kind of thing, I mean, you can still quantify it, you know, marketing roles and social media and that kind of thing, you know, views, the projects that you've worked on, the campaigns that you've put forward. It's about keeping a log of all of the work that you've done. It can be slightly more difficult, but as you mentioned, I mean, you know, just because it's not a sales figure that you've done X amount per month, you've absolutely added revenue to the bottom line. And it's just understanding what that looks like for you in your role, packaging that up and taking it to your manager. Because when you know, if you end up leaving that business, you would do that when you go and interview for another role and say, I've done all these incredible things. So you just need to make sure that you understand that now. And if you're asking for more money in the role you're currently in, packaging that up and keeping along with it.
Yeah, because also the other thing is as well is that, you know, businesses know that it's so much better to keep someone on than to have to hire a new person. And that's the other thing that I think maybe this is more applicable to more people more early on in their career, but also maybe it's not, that people actually would feel more comfortable to go and look for a new job and, let's say, get a 10 grand pay rise than go to have that awkward conversation with your boss and say, I'm worth more. Would you say that is that what you found in your experience?
Yeah, and I think especially, I think a few years ago was like peak, it was a candidate market. I mean, you could get any job you wanted, really. It was like just after COVID times, and people were getting incredible pay rises. And we can't sit here and say, of course, if you go and get a job elsewhere, generally that kind of like that uplift tends to be more because you're going to somewhere completely new and it's possible you can negotiate that better. But I do think there's so many things you can do in your current role, but it's just about setting it up. It is a difficult conversation to have, but thankfully, if it's not something you're super comfortable with doing face to face, because it is hard to sit in front of your manager or whoever it is and have that discussion, you can line that up in a really sort of clever way. Like I always think as well, if you're not able to negotiate a pay rise when you get a job, at least get a 6-month review in. I'm not talking probation. I'm talking a kind of separate discussion where on the agenda is your salary and your performance. Because if that's locked in, as soon as you get that job, your leverage is gone. Once you're through the door, you don't really have that anymore. So if you can say, look, I'm happy to accept the offer. It is slightly less than I was expecting, but I'm more than happy to prove myself in the first 6 months. Could we please have a catch up booked in for X date? And I would love to, review the salary and performance. And then you've got that locked in. So I always think that's a good idea. If you're unable to get kind of any uplift when you negotiate, even good just to book that in anyway. But if you're in your current role, I would, again, it's about carving out that discussion with your manager. I don't think it's something you can kind of just go over and say, I want to have a chat about salary. I think you've got to give them the opportunity to have a think about it and have the discussions. Because you also don't know, right? Obviously, you might have been doing really great work for the last 6 months. It might be that there's been some internal discussions around some, promotions or some salary increases. You might not be privy to that. So you might actually be approaching something that has been discussed. And actually, it's a good opportunity to do that. But unless you bring it up, you're not going to know. And you can do that in any way. You can set up a meeting, or perhaps you have a monthly one-to-one. Why not send them an email a week before and say, I'd really love just to add a point to the agenda. If we could have a discussion around my salary, and setting it up prior to the conversation. Because if you walk in the room, right, you are kind of like, you're taking them, it's a bit blind, isn't it, for you both? And you can do that. Sometimes the time's right, isn't it? It's the right time just to say it. You might be having a coffee with your manager or maybe something a bit more informal. But I think when it comes to the position that you're currently in and it's something you want to discuss, try and do it as kind of like professionally as you can and set it up, because it gives them the chance to think about it and have the discussions they need to have.
Because it's unlikely that they're just going to be able to say yes or no right there and then. They're going to have so you're almost helping yourself out as well by giving them the opportunity to get the answer before they're back in the room with you.
Yeah, definitely.
And like you say, then it makes you feel less awkward about bringing it up face to face and being, looking the person in the eye.
Yeah, I mean, let's not dance around it. It's not easy. And, even I mean, for me to just walk into a room and ask because my manager's the CEO, so it's a bit of a tricky one to say, I want more money, but it is something that you kind of have to push yourself out your comfort zone. And honestly, if you don't do it, no one else will. Like, no one else is fighting for you. It's great to have a great support system at work and, that kind of thing, and people that you can chat with, but they're not the ones that are going to get you more money. That's you.
It's so true. And also, it's about making sure that you're speaking to the right person about it as well, because like you say, you can speak to your colleagues about it and your peers and complain or say, I don't think that I'm paid enough, but that isn't going to go anywhere either. Like, you have to go to the person that's going to be able to make the difference for you, as awkward as it might be.
Yeah, and it can be, obviously, I do think pay, especially now, is much more widely spoken about, as it should be. But you do have to be a little bit careful, because if it's a conversation you have with, colleagues and peers and friends, it can be a little bit detrimental. It is best to have that discussion with the person that can make the decision, because the last thing you want is to be in a really good position to get a pay rise, and then it be kind of like found out through the grapevine that you've been complaining about the pay and that kind of thing. Even if you've not, it just obviously reflects badly. So it is something to be a bit coy about, I think. I think it's important that we understand where our averages are, and So I work in a business where it's very much banded, because it's recruitment and we've got consultants and they know where they stand. But there are so many businesses where people are literally blind. And like, I know of times that I've negotiated my salary and I know it's been a lot higher than, other people. And that is because I've negotiated, but also it's a balance. It can be really tricky. But yeah, have discussions, but still be a little bit coy, because you do need to be a little bit careful. You don't want it to detriment your position in the business.
And then I think also just for us, obviously we're in housing, but I know there's other people on this call as well, that, I used to work for Aldi. So when I got my job at Aldi, there was no negotiation. If I negotiated, I think they probably would have laughed in my face. Like, there's no negotiation here. This is a salary that every single person that starts this grad scheme gets, and that's it. So I had to then take myself out of that like headspace to then go into the next thing that I was doing, because not a lot of businesses are like that. Yes, some are, but if you, what I'm trying to say in a very long-winded way is, if you've come from a business or a company that is like that, that's very regimented, that this is the salary, there's no negotiation, that's how we work here, and then you're leaving that behind, leave it behind and really help yourself, like maybe rewatch this session if you need to just be like, that isn't where I work anymore. I work somewhere completely different, and like, gloves are off here. I can ask for whatever I want.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift. You're exactly right, and it is, and it's building that bit of confidence. But you're right, so many companies are heavily banded, and it's difficult to go from that to then go for somewhere that's like just so open that you can kind of negotiate anything.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, of negotiating anything and sort of asking for anything, on the benefits front, because I feel like that's also something that's kind of got a bit more airtime in maybe the last few years. Have you ever sort of been creative in terms of what benefits you've asked for, or do you have any advice around that in terms of what benefits people should be looking for, and women in particular?
It's a really good point, actually, because it's like my business now. We have some incredible benefits. Now, if you asked me to list them all, I wouldn't know them all, which is bad, actually, because there's probably ones that I could utilize more and tap into. But we shouldn't underestimate what's on offer. Like, a benefits package can really add value to what the salary is. Sometimes if you're picking between two businesses and the salary is similar, or it's a few grand difference, if one's got a brilliant benefits package with things like private healthcare and more flexibility and that kind of thing, it can actually be a lot more beneficial. I think when you're negotiating and you think you've hit the limit with money, with monetary value, and you have to look at benefits, flexibility is obviously hugely important, especially as females. It might be that we perhaps need to do, childcare hours, or, more flexibility, school pickups, anything really. We want early finishes on a Friday, things like that. Some people want to condense their hours into 4 days and they just want a 4-day week just because. But you do have that leverage. And actually, if you come armed with that, if you know that you've hit your limit, because if they say we can't offer you any money and that's it, then that's kind of you out the game, isn't it? You're done then, and you haven't got your money. But if you say, right, look, I appreciate that, perhaps we can revisit, the monetary value in 6 or 12 months, but I want to review like my benefits package or flexibility. I'd actually like to request that I have another day from home. I'd like more hybrid working. You can certainly bring that into it. I think it's a really brilliant thing to do. I did something quite creative when I moved to Manchester, and that was something that I asked for, because I knew that I wouldn't earn commission those first 3 months. I said to them, look, would you be able to do anything about that, essentially, because I kind of be taking, even though the salary was more, the base level, I would actually be taking a pay cut, because I wouldn't be earning as much commission as I did in the role in Cheltenham. So they looked at that and they offered me like a package for the first 3 months, which was actually massively helpful. Now, appreciate not everyone's got commercial sales roles, that's fine, but you can do things like that, relocation packages. And I'm not talking like you're moving to the other side of the world or the country, like even if it's another hour's drive, more petrol, more fuel, like you can be super creative with the things that you want. But benefits it's a really brilliant way to negotiate, add value, and we shouldn't underestimate benefits either. Like I said, I need to investigate ours a little bit more. I mean, we've got some brilliant ones like gym memberships and things like that, and it all adds value. Like I would take a slightly lower salary from somewhere that really looks after their people and has a great benefits, maternity package and that kind of thing, over maybe the 5 grand that I would get somewhere else.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. And because it gives you that stability, security, and it also shows you who they are and how they're going to treat you when
Yes.
you start there.
That is such a good point. Like I have had some very interesting roles in some interesting companies that have ended up being a little bit different than I thought. I always said to myself that I will really look at things like Glassdoor reviews and take them seriously. And it's such a good point. If you are in a process as well, right? Even if it is your dream job, if you get a bad feeling about that and they treat you in a way that is not right, or they talk about things that yeah, the benefits and things like that aren't adequate enough for you, it probably isn't the right thing for you. And as difficult as it is
Mm,
to walk away, it is literally like the premise for the future. Like you are looking
mm,
at what that role is going to be and how they're going to
yeah.
treat you. It's a really good factor to think about, because we do get excited and we do think, oh my goodness, I've got a job offer, but that's your life. Like your job is your
Mm,
life. Like I know I spend more time in my work and I'm there all the time. It's like that is my livelihood and my life, and if they're not giving me what I need from day one, it's likely they're never going to do that.
yeah, definitely. And also that sort of courting period is like the that you before you really know them. Like it's
Yeah.
actually probably the best that is ever going to be.
Yeah.
So and if the best isn't quite right, then it's not going to be right. Definitely when it's not at its best and when it's a bit stressful
Yeah.
at times. And also on that note, something that we do now with our interviews, and we've done it for a while actually, is when we're interviewing people, we have to write on our feedback like what's one con of this person. And sometimes I'll even ask the person, you know, we do this when we're writing our feedback, what would be a con of you? And the reason is because we found that we were getting a real big like halo effect around people thinking they're going to be amazing, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, they're going to change the business, and then we weren't really stopping ourselves thinking actually what could be bad. And I would flip that when you're looking from a candidate perspective
Yeah.
and also think what is the con of this place? Like it seems absolutely amazing and they're going to give me this and this package and that and the salary and the bonus and the benefits and da da da, but like pull yourself back and think, is there one thing that actually might not be the best, and then decide whether that's okay for you if it was to sort of realize itself.
If it's too good to be true, it usually is. And if your gut's telling you something, it's usually right,
Yeah,
unfortunately. And I've been
yeah.
stung by it multiple times. And especially with commercial roles, you do get a bit stuck because of things like commission. But honestly, I've looked back and I've been like, I've spent a couple of years there and I could have been earning so much more somewhere else because the commission structure was really not in my favor and that kind of thing. So, it's not undoable. If you don't like somewhere, you, as long as you've got kind of like provisions in place and things, then you can totally leave there. You're not stuck, but it is
Mm,
difficult. You can't just walk away from something. And yeah, but you want to make the right decision for you, and it shouldn't be yeah, you shouldn't underestimate that decision. It's a huge
mm,
undertaking.
yeah, definitely. And then back on the negotiation and the benefits and the job front, um, what would you what would you say to someone who has never negotiated before? And probably a good example is like what I said, if you've come from a place where, you know, it was super
Mm.
rigid and you've just never been in that environment where it might be an option,
Mm.
what would be sort of top tips?
So do your research 100%. Do your research on the business. Do your research. As I said, ChatGPT AI is blooming amazing. Get it to have a look at the averages, for that role, and also what the progression could potentially look like. I think that's what's really important to understand is, if you come from a place that's maybe more banded, you know exactly what your progression routes are, because they literally show you the banding and how
Mm,
you move
mm,
up through that. And usually they show you like the time it takes and that kind of thing. When you move away from that, you're a little bit more blind. So I think during the interview process, before you accept an offer, it's very important to understand the progression plan, because it will be very different than what you're used to in more of a structured, banded environment. I know that from experience. I mean, sometimes it's super positive. You can jump up a couple of roles. You don't have to necessarily go like this and jump through the levels. But on the flip side, for someone that's used to a lot more structure and understanding what their next step is, it can be a little bit you are blind to that. So I think doing your research, having a look at competitors as well, using AI as a function to look at industry averages and where you should really position yourself and what your next step up would be. And then when it comes to actually doing it, it's like it is a confidence thing, and it is kind of, you know, thinking about how you're going to approach that. If you're getting a new role, you can have that conversation over email rather than having to have it in person, which is slightly easier for those that haven't done it before. But it's just having the backing, you know, having the reason, you know, it's because I've seen this role advertised at X and I believe that I will be doing the same responsibilities. So I'd like to look at salary that is within this remit. You know, it might be that the responsibilities are more than the current role you're on and you're looking for a step up. You've just got to approach it in a way that you've got the kind of, you know, that you're asking for something that's within the realms of reality. I think if you know that you're kind of going for something that might be a bit, you know, out of the ordinary, then it might be that it is. But for someone that's not done it before, it is just about building your confidence. And honestly, if you don't ask, you don't get. And like we spoke about before, no one else is going to ask for you. So if you don't do it, then it's just not going to happen. So sometimes you just got to push yourself out your comfort zone and do it. But yeah.
And also, if you do ask, you're not going to get fired. I think is also a good thing to remember. Like if you ask, then the worst that can happen is that the answer is no, and you're exactly the same situation as you were yesterday when you didn't ask.
Yeah, and it actually does set you up in a better position. So like, for example, I went for a team leader role when I had just gone into the account management team. I was like I was in my infancy of that role. I think it was literally in the first month, but I was like, well, I want to be a team leader at some point. And I thought, you know what? I did the presentation. I did everything I was supposed to. Didn't get it. Of course I didn't get it. But the next time that they were looking for a team leader, they rang me straight up and I was the one that was chosen. It's the same with things like asking for, you know, additional income and things like that, or like it's like that scenario with roles and promotions. You just have to put yourself out there, and it might be that you're the next one on the list. It might not be then, but it might be the next time, and you've positioned yourself incredibly, you know, better than others have. And you know, especially if you have a lot of, I wouldn't say like competition within your business, but let's say there's lots of people that are in similar roles. Sometimes it is about just putting yourself in that position. It might not be you yet, but you might be the next time.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. That, well, not the exact same, so I'm going to ask it you anyway. That what has there been a time where you asked for something and were told no?
Probably that. I think I briefly looked at the questions before, and that came to mind was that team leader role, because I went in there and kind of asked for it, but obviously didn't get it and got it later on. So that was amazing. I mean, I've lost out on roles that I thought I was going to get. I mean, I have asked for more money before and it's not been the right timing, but like I live to tell the tale. You know, it's not overly awful. Like you said, I mean, you're not going to get fired over it. But yeah, there's been times, but to be honest, like if I really think about it, a lot of the times that I've asked for things when they've been backed by evidence and there's a real reason, it has happened, whether it's been right then or whether it has taken a little bit of time. Because like you said about speaking to your managers, they can't really make a decision on the spot. Usually they have to go away and think about it. It might be in the next kind of run of promotions and that kind of thing. Like sometimes you just have to wait a bit, and that's just unfortunately the way it lies. But yeah, I don't want to be that person that says most of the things that I've asked for I've got, but generally it's happened. And if it's not happened in that moment, it's happened at a later date.
I was thinking about this question for myself because I also would have a similar answer, but then it made me think, well, am I not asking for enough? Am I not asking enough? You know what I mean? Because
let's ask for more.
It's almost like, should you ask until you get a no, and then you realize, right, that was the limit.
Yeah, I mean, I did in my one-to-one say to my CEO, I think there's some people from my workplace on here, but I was talking about my progression and I was like, I'm really loving it. And I was like, so where can I go from here? And he turned around the laptop, he showed me the hierarchy. He went, well, there's one person's face above you. and it was obviously him. So it's like, well, you know, there is progression, but it's like sometimes what what you're pushing for might not be within kind of the realms, you know, immediately, but it might be a future thing. But yeah, they'll let you know if it's something that is completely out of the realms. You know, they'll tell you. They're not going to think that you're silly for asking or anything like that. Any discussions around progression and met with a welcome, you know, discussion. If you go to anyone in the business and you talk about, you know, what you're looking for in progression and, you know, you'd like to be in X role in X amount of time, that's fantastic for them to hear. They're concerned about people that are flight risks, not the people that are, looking to progress. Like, music to their ears. Yeah, it's ambitious, and they want people like that, and those are the people that they'll push. It's like we were talking about you do have to be careful when you talk about things negatively within the business, when you're talking to colleagues. Don't get me wrong, outside of the business, by the way, and I talk about this a lot, it's really brilliant. If people in this chat have thought about getting mentors or have ever thought being a mentor, massive advocate for it. And that is an amazing kind of space for you to go and have those discussions around, how do I ask for more money? I feel like I'm not maybe in the right role, or I should ask for more, or that they can help with all of that. It's just a sounding board. Internally, you do have to be a little bit more careful because, self-promotion within a business, again, I'm an advocate for this, because no one else is going to do it for you. You're more likely to get picked for something or put forward or thought about for something if you are spoken highly about in the business, or you have great relationships with those that are above and below. I say above and below, I don't mean that, but as in, all of those in the business. If you've got good relationships, it's really important. If you're the one that's constantly kind of complaining or talking about this, that, the other, it does get back. It does get heard about, and it's important to think about that. Frustrations, we all have them, and I'm not saying don't talk about them, but there are definitely safe spaces to be able to do that without kind of being detrimental to your own progression.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Okay, thank you so much for that answer. So then my next question is, what's the biggest myth that you hear about negotiating?
I think what we said is like that you're going to get fired. That,
right, yeah.
It's going to go terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the job. They're going to rescind the offer. It's all going to go to shit. You're going to lose your house. It's the whole thing comes tumbling down. But it isn't that. Like, we've touched on it. It is advantageous. It is not going to be of detriment to you, especially in something like a commercial role. They are looking for that edge and that tenacity, and that's something, even in support roles, anything really, it shows a bit of drive, it shows a bit of ambition, it shows you care about what you're doing. If you just accept the first offer, where do you kind of place yourself as someone that wants to consistently grow and do more? It kind of shows you as a person that says, yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the status quo. I never want to question it. Don't feel like you can't question the status quo as well, and like opinions. Like, you are a valuable asset and voice within a business, especially as a female as well. We've got to start speaking up more, because what we're saying is valuable, and that presents itself, when we're negotiating salary, or it does in meetings and that kind of thing. It's across the board. But yeah, I think the biggest, the myth is that you're going to kind of lose everything that you've worked for, and look, position it in a way that's professional and suitable and with evidence, but you're not gonna detriment it that much.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And I think as well, anyone who's ever come out of these potentially awkward conversations when you're going into it, afterwards you feel so much better, A, that you've asked, and B, like, oh god, well, that wasn't really that bad, like, and so then you've asked then, and then it's out of your hands, and whatever they come back to you with is fine. And I think you have kind of made peace with whatever the answer is. You just have to get it out and say it.
Yeah, I think that with anything, having any difficult conversation, I'm like, just get the words out, or just type it, just send it. And once it's out, it's out. You can't take it back. Like, you can't retract it. So if you can just get the words out, then you're in a position of right. And like you said, like, I think once you've said it as well, you do make peace with the fact that it might not be a possibility there and then, but you're like, at least I blooming did it. And all you can do is learn from each individual time. Like, I have now, like I said, I negotiated that first role when I was 20, 9-10 years of negotiating. You get better every time. Like, there's still difficult conversations. Bringing it up is probably the hardest bit. But once it's out, you build your confidence. It's like anything. You've got to push yourself out your comfort zone to be able to improve. Otherwise, you just won't practice the things that you need to do.
Yeah. And I think as well that, if you've got a good leader, in any situation, whether it's asking your manager for a pay rise internally, or whether it's, going for a new job, I really like the analogy of where if you've got a good leader, like they're gonna be impressed by the fact that you've asked. And the analogy is, if you've got, let's say, a professional runner or professional athlete, and they're seeing someone who's just starting, and they're just starting to, they've bought some running trainers and they're going to go on their first run, like they'll be really impressed and they'll be really like, oh, go on, good job for kind of giving it a go. They're not going to be laughing at you because you're slow or because you don't look as professional as they do. Like, they're the expert and they're the big leader in it, and they're going to sort of back you for having a go. So same in this, like if you've got the right leader and you've got a person who is, that should be in that position, they're going to be like, fair play, well done for asking. The answer's no, but never mind, like let's work towards it. And then I think if you're not getting that kind of response, then that actually says more about them than it does about you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If your manager feels threatened potentially by the fact that you want to progress and that you're asking for more money, that is that's on them. That's not to do with you. And then you have a slightly different issue. If you feel that you're going to your manager, and in your one-to-one you're bringing up these thoughts and feelings about your progression and salary increase, and you don't think that it's being met with that they're going to speak to someone else, or they're kind of cutting it off, it might be that's a separate conversation. You might have to potentially have a conversation with someone that's maybe above them, or maybe with HR or something like that, if you do feel like it's kind of maybe unfair. But if they feel threatened, that is an impact on them. A great leader should be someone that wants to see that person grow and will help them do that. Now, whether they can do that through monetary values or just through training and things like that, they will make it happen. They won't just say no and not give you anything else. It's like with progression and money. If they can't give the money, you'd hope that your manager would be like, look, but I can potentially get you on this leadership course, or let's do some more internal training, or I'd like to put you forward for X, rather than just no.
Yeah, definitely. And on that note as well, I don't know why this has just come into my head, but advice for people on the call, hopefully you will already look at this, but when you are looking at salary increases and or new jobs with salary increases, check the tax bands, because it actually might make more sense for you to, let's say, negotiate 5 days extra holiday, which isn't going to impact your salary, versus getting a £5,000 pay rise that pushes you over to the next tax bracket and then you actually have a pay cut. So look at those, and you can ask ChatGPT, literally just say, if I'm on this or if I'm on that, what's my take home, which is higher? Like, it'll take 2 seconds. Also a very big fan of ChatGPT, as anyone from HSBG will tell you. Love it. So yeah, that's just also something good to look into. And yeah, my other question, kind of on the back of the being told no thing, is, have you ever not asked for something and then later on regretted it?
Oh, probably, yes. Probably when I haven't sort of negotiated as much. I mean, like I said before, I kind of have done where I've seen the opportunity. Like, obviously when I've gone for new roles and that kind of thing. I'd say there was a time at one business a few years ago where they were kind of clever in the way they did it, because they gave me what I wanted from a role perspective, but the salary didn't come with that. So they gave me essentially the promotion, and they said that the salary would follow. But it ended up being, I think, about 6 months later. And realistically, that was really bad. Like, they shouldn't have done that. I should have got that pay rise when I got the title change. But I don't know if it was a way to kind of like push it back in the year or that kind of thing. But realistically, I'd rather have waited for both those things to happen at the same time, because what you end up doing is responsibilities beyond your pay grade, and not getting remunerated for them. Now, if it's on the horizon, obviously that's a different story. But I just think in that moment, I kind of felt like I should have got that pay rise sooner and had that conversation. But most of the time, I think I've managed to kind of ask for the things that I've wanted. I'm sure there are examples, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Nice one. Thank you. And then I've got one more question, but whilst I'm asking that, if anyone else has any questions, then feel free to write it in the chat. So do you have any, I know you've given a lot of advice, which has been amazing, so the answer might be, I've said it all, but do you have any additional advice for people in smaller organizations where big pay jumps aren't necessarily possible?
Yeah, in that scenario, it can be really difficult. I mean, I was in a startup scenario last year and there was only three of us. And, I was working so closely with the CEO. He was putting his own personal money in. It gets very personal. Now, business isn't personal. However, it can really feel like it. And I do think that we need to be respectful of that. What I would say is, obviously, there's more opportunities for shares and things like that. And I think that that is really important. If you're working in a small business and you have the potential to maybe look at shares, I would seriously do that instead of maybe asking for more money, because you're not costing them anymore. However, you're getting a however big it is chunk of the business. It pushes you to stay there longer. You've got more loyalty to them because you are potentially waiting for that, if they sell or if they, put themselves on the market or anything like that. But there are definitely things you can do. I think it's a more personal approach. You have to be kind of a little bit more respectful. It's things like family run businesses or small teams. Obviously, we pick up the slack for each other in small teams. It's you have a lot more responsibilities a lot of the time, but sometimes that's quite enjoyable. But yeah, maybe looking at things like share packages rather than asking for actually, more salary or more money.
And then you can tell them that as well, like you say, I'm asking for this because I understand that it's a small business and the extra money isn't possible, but I want to show you that I'm really bought
Yeah.
in. So, and they'd be so impressed by that. They'd love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Wow, a lot to take in. I feel like I've learned loads from you as well, as I'm sure everybody else has too. So, does anybody have any questions? I'll give it a few seconds to write in the chat. And then if not, I am going to wrap it up. Oh, Poppy has got a question. Yes, Poppy.
Sorry, I don't want to write in the chat.
Okay, fine.
So I'll just speak. If you don't get the pay rise, so I think the big key thing is obviously asking like, well, how do I get that? And like not seeing the knockback. So have you ever had a scenario where, we can't give you the pay rise at the moment, which is, obviously multiple reasons why it might not. But I think the key thing, maybe what I've learned in this past was how do I get there then? Because I think I'm already there. So you need to like give that. That's one of my questions. And the other question is, I actually want to put a bit more pushback on companies. And I think as a company, we do well in this, but it's actually like looking at salaries every year. Like you shouldn't, as a company, I don't think they should wait for the person to come to them being like, well, actually, I'm now paid lower than the average. I think like, we have to really put a bit more onus on companies to be like looking at this constantly. And, some companies might not do well, but others are, is really looking at benchmarking your salaries every year because they do change, don't they? So don't really know if there's a question in that, but I think there was the first time.
It's a really, really good point. Companies and businesses should be more proactive. It shouldn't be employees having to find that information, because it's only if we find it that we then go to them, because otherwise they kind of just fall under the radar and get away with it and not have to kind of increase salaries. In regards to that, the question, it's a really good point. What you could do if you don't get the salary but you feel like you're on that level, or you want to find out where you need to be, you can potentially ask for like the job description of the role that's up, because if you are able to get that and you're like tick, 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 and you're doing all of those things, you do quite literally have that factual proof and evidence that you're doing so. But really good point. If you don't get the promotion or the pay rise, make sure to find out what it is you need to do. And if you feel that you're doing all those things, you need to book that back in with them and say, look, I completely understand it might not be, possible to do the kind of the pay rise or the promotion, but I am literally covering all these things and I'm already doing it. So where do we kind of stand with that now? And that's a conversation they need to understand, because it might be that, yeah, that's for them really to then make that decision.
And also on the back of that as well, I would encourage people to see it almost like a relationship. So, when you're in a relationship and hopefully, you bring issues to the table if you've got, and you try different things to get to a resolution and to get to a harmonious place. You don't just bring an issue and be like, your shit's all over the floor, we're getting divorced. Like I'm done. So really, think of it like that as well. Like you've invested X amount of months or years into this relationship already. So don't then just think, right, well, they've said no, so I'm out. Like really think, okay, they said no. Maybe I don't actually like the way that they said no. So that's an issue, which we'll cover. But also, what else can we do to be somewhere more in between yes and no that isn't just no, because I'm in here, like I've invested, let's say 3 years, and I don't want to leave, and what can we do? Because I just feel like I would also love for people, and I've been in this situation as well, where it was like, this is a bit awkward, I'm just going to look for another job where I can probably do better, and I'm happy with those decisions, but maybe I should have actually just had a deeper conversation that could have led to a different outcome. Who knows?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sophie. You have been an amazing guest and an amazing finale to our She Owns It series. So I really, really appreciate your input and everything. And yeah, I hope everyone has got a lot out of this, as I know I have, and hopefully Poppy as well. As I've seen you, I can see you.
No, it's been brilliant. Hopefully I've done the topic justice, but it's a really brilliant forum, things like this. There should be more of them.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. Well, everyone, have a lovely weekend, have a lovely day, and see you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.